One day, you may realize that your life did not collapse. It simply became too small for your soul, and you kept calling that normal. There is a kind of suffering that does not look serious at first. It can live inside a respectable life. It can wear routine well. It can move through work, conversation, ambition, and ordinary responsibilities without attracting much attention. From the outside, nothing appears broken. Yet somewhere underneath all of that movement, a quieter truth begins to harden. The life you are living no longer feels large enough for the person living it. This is how many people begin to disappear from themselves, not through open catastrophe, but through slow accommodation. They learn to function inside a life that no longer carries any deep weight. They answer messages, fulfill obligations, keep moving, and tell themselves that this dullness is simply adulthood. But the human mind does not adapt well to meaninglessness. It does not remain undisturbed when a person keeps living in ways that are too small, too false, or too disconnected from what matters. Sooner or later, the cost begins to show. It may first appear as anxiety. Sometimes it takes the shape of depression, inner exhaustion, compulsive distraction, emotional numbness, or a strange panic that seems to arrive without a clear reason. Modern life usually teaches people to interpret these states in fragments. They are told to look only at symptoms, only at chemical imbalances, only at the surface disturbance. But what if, in many cases, the deeper problem is not only what is happening in the brain, but what has gone wrong in the life itself? Carl Jung believed that much psychological suffering cannot be understood apart from the way a person is living. He did not reduce inner distress to a simple defect. He often saw it as a signal, a form of pressure from the psyche itself, demanding confrontation with a life that has become distorted, weak, or untrue. That view remains disturbing because it removes one of our favorite comforts, the fantasy that we can suffer deeply without having to change deeply. The first truth this forces you to face is not pleasant. Life is not designed to remove difficulty on your behalf. It does not become meaningful by becoming easier. In fact, a life without meaningful struggle can become unbearable in a different way. A person who keeps expecting comfort as a natural state slowly becomes unfit for reality. They begin treating every friction as an error, every challenge as unfair, every demand as a violation of how things should be. But Jung understood something harsher and more useful than that. Human beings need difficulty, not in endless excess, but in a form strong enough to call their character into existence. Without that pressure, something in the personality remains unfinished. A person may continue living, but they do so without much inner authority. They become easier to overwhelm, easier to distract, easier to sedate. And a sedated life, no matter how polished it looks, is still a diminished one. That is why a comfortable life can still feel deeply wrong. Many people live in conditions their ancestors might have called fortunate, yet remain inwardly hunted. They move from one desire to another, from one distraction to another, from one emotional escape to another, and still feel pursued by something they cannot name. What follows them is not bad luck. It is often the emptiness created by living without a compelling reason to endure themselves. This is where the modern person becomes especially vulnerable. When suffering appears, the instinct is often to look backward forever. People want the perfect explanation. They want to know exactly why they became the way they are before they take responsibility for the life they are living now. Sometimes this search is honest. Often it is a sophisticated delay. The past becomes a hiding place because the present makes demands. As long as you are still analyzing your wounds, you do not yet have to confront what your daily habits are doing to your future. Jung was suspicious of that kind of fixation. He knew that explanation can become evasion. A person may learn the entire history of their pain and still refuse the one act that would begin to reorder their life. The soul does not heal simply because it has been interpreted. At some point, it asks for a different form of honesty. That honesty begins with the shadow. Jung's idea of the shadow remains useful, because it cuts against self-flattery. The shadow is not merely the evil part of you. It is everything you have pushed out of sight because it felt inconvenient, shameful, unlovable, dangerous, or socially unacceptable. Some of it is weakness. Some of it is resentment. Some of it is cowardice. Some of it is anger you were taught never to express. Some of it is strength you buried because other people preferred you softer, smaller, easier to control. And the more you deny it, the more it begins ruling you from below. That is the danger. What remains unconscious does not disappear. It distorts. It grows dense. It emerges in the wrong place, at the wrong time, in forms you do not understand. A man who refuses to acknowledge his rage may become passive for years, only to explode at the most trivial inconvenience. A woman who has buried her hunger for power may begin calling every ambitious impulse selfish, while quietly growing bitter toward those who move boldly through life. Someone who has rejected their capacity for conflict may keep choosing humiliation over confrontation, and then call their weakness peace. Jung understood that bringing the shadow into consciousness is not about becoming darker. It is about becoming less divided. Once something is seen, it can be worked with. A flaw can be disciplined. An impulse can be redirected. A buried strength can be reclaimed. But what is hidden rules in secret. One of the simplest ways to glimpse your shadow is to study what consistently disturbs you in others. The traits that provoke intense, irrational dislike often point toward something unexamined in yourself. Another path is even more difficult: honest self-observation after your own failures, especially the ones you rush to justify. That kind of honesty can feel brutal at first, but it is also strangely liberating. Self-deception is expensive. Clarity, even when painful, begins restoring inner power. Still, insight alone is not enough. A person can become more self-aware and remain just as lost. They can understand their patterns beautifully and continue living beneath themselves. What finally changes the atmosphere of a life is not only seeing more clearly, but serving something larger than the maintenance of your own comfort. This is where Jung becomes unexpectedly severe. He believed that many people suffer because their lives make no deep sense to them. Not theoretical sense, not social respectability, a more serious kind of meaning, one that justifies existence from within. He once described the need to feel like an actor in a larger drama of life, rather than a disconnected creature drifting through trivial pursuits. In that view, psychological healing is not only about symptom reduction. It is about discovering a reason to carry your life with dignity. This may sound abstract until you look honestly at the alternative. Without meaning, people become compulsive seekers. They chase novelty, travel, romance, money, recognition, status, productivity, and endless self-improvement techniques. Not because any of these things are evil, but because they hope movement itself will spare them from feeling empty. Yet the void is not impressed by motion. It is not filled by accumulation. It remains. Sometimes it even grows. You can see this everywhere now. A person jumps from one obsession to the next. Another is always planning a new life, but never inhabiting the one in front of them. Someone else turns every day into content, every feeling into performance, every struggle into branding, yet still goes to sleep with the same quiet suspicion that none of it has touched the center. That suspicion matters, because the mind does not want distraction as much as it wants orientation. It wants to know that your efforts belong to something. It wants to feel that your existence is not merely consumption, reaction, and private maintenance. It wants a reason to bear difficulty that is greater than survival and more dignified than vanity. A soft reminder before we go further: if a part of you already knows where your life has become false, stay with that discomfort. The place you most want to look away from is often the place from which a better life must begin. Meaning will not arrive just because you wish for it. It usually demands service, responsibility, and sacrifice. For some, that may take religious form. For others, it may emerge through devotion to truth, justice, family, craft, beauty, or creation. The form differs, What matters is whether the life you are living actually asks something serious of you, and whether you can say, with some honesty, that your existence is contributing rather than merely passing through. That is what gives a person dignity, not comfort, not image, not applause. A life begins to gain depth when it stops revolving around the avoidance of discomfort and starts organizing itself around what is worth suffering for. This changes your relationship to anxiety. It changes your relationship to depression. It even changes your relationship to effort. Pain is not automatically erased, but it is no longer the whole story. Once your life has direction, your suffering is no longer floating. It belongs to something. It can be carried differently. Feelings stop tyrannizing the whole personality because the self is no longer serving them as the highest authority. That is one reason some people appear inwardly stronger than others. They are not free of difficulty. They are anchored by meaning. Their lives point somewhere. Their actions participate in something they regard as real. And because of that, they are less likely to break under the ordinary pressures that destroy those who live without inner orientation. The modern tragedy is that many people wait for a meaningful life to be handed to them by impulse, certainty, or mood. They think purpose should feel obvious from the beginning. More often, it becomes visible only after commitment. Meaning deepens as you begin serving what matters, not before. Action reveals. Discipline clarifies. Responsibility educates desire. So the question is no longer, what do I feel like doing? It becomes, what kind of life would make my suffering worth bearing? That is a harder question. It is also a better one. Because once you begin living toward that answer, a different kind of mind begins to form. One that is less fascinated with escape, less obsessed with comfort, less seduced by the past, less fragmented by denial. What emerges in its place is not perfection, but integration. You become less split against yourself. Your strengths stop hiding in the shadow. Your weaknesses stop ruling from secret chambers. Your days begin to align more closely with what you actually respect. That is not a small change. It is the beginning of psychological adulthood, and it means that the cure to inner misery is not always softness. Sometimes it is reality, character, confrontation, discipline, meaning, and the refusal to remain spiritually unemployed. If you continue escaping, life may remain tolerable for a while, but tolerance is not the same as peace. The part of you that knows you are wasting yourself does not fall silent forever. Sooner or later, it returns, sometimes as dread, sometimes as sorrow, sometimes as the humiliating realization that you have learned to survive in ways that no longer deserve to be called living. The better alternative is more demanding, but also more beautiful. Face what you have buried. Question what your life is serving. Stop treating comfort as your highest good. Find what gives your existence weight and begin carrying it seriously. That is not an instant cure. It is something better than that. It is the beginning of a life that no longer feels disposable. If this spoke to something you have been avoiding in yourself, stay close to Silent Mind Academy. Not for noise, for the kind of clarity that helps you stop losing your life in ways the world keeps calling normal.